Hello, everyone. I'm Janet from Drawla Mountain Center, and I'm here today with Andrew Holacek, who will be teaching a program at Drawla Mountain Center called the Blissful Pure Lands this May 20th to 26th. So we're just going to hear a little bit from Andrew about the program and the Pure Lands and yeah, welcome, Andrew. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects. Very, very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. So what are these Pure Lands?
Yeah, right. Well, a couple things. In the Buddhist world, this is actually the Pure Land tradition is actually the largest form of Buddhism. There's over 100 million practitioners. So there's something going on here, right? These are the tradition itself was taught by the historical Buddha Shakyamuni. And there was actually one scholar who did the homework on it and said something like 13% of the Buddha's teachings were devoted to Pure Land doctrine. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And so these Pure Lands, there's many different types. And part of the program is going to be talking about all the different types, Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya, Nirmanakaya, Pure Lands, partial. I mean, it's just an entire variety. So we're going to kind of cascade through what those are, talking about the principal ones. And really, the Pure Lands that we are most interested in, at least people who are students of the Buddhist tradition and abide by some of these principles, is literally called Dewa Chen Sukhavati, literally the land of bliss, the land of great bliss. And it is a location as real, or I like to say unreal, as this dimension. So it is philosophically speaking, it's as ontologically real as this. It's not a symbol, it's not a metaphor. It's a place that one can go to that was created in this particular case by one of the great kind of what are called celestial Buddhas, Amitabha, for people to enter a dimension that is non-retrogressive. I mean, this is actually one reason why people want to go there. People often say, "Oh, why should I go to these Pure Lands? In addition to what are they? Why should I go there?" Well, one reason you want to go there is they are considered non-retrogressive. And what that means is that once you get there after death, right? So these are locations that people aspire to attain after they transition. And so one of the reasons you go there is it's a little bit like it's like the business model, location, 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 right? So if you have the right location, like Sukhavati, and by the way, we go there because it has the playing on the idea of journeying, it has the easiest visa requirements, right? Of the thousands, I don't know how many, I really don't know how many there are. There's so many of these. Of all of the Pure Lands, by far the most accessible, easiest one to enter into. And we talk about this at great length. What are these visa requirements? What does it take to get in there? How do you practice it? But you want to get there, for most people, it's the best chance they have during the transitional processes after death. And you go there partly because location, location, location. It's a little bit like going to Harvard versus staying back in a community college, or everything in the environment as articulated in three main principal sutras, and we'll actually be engaging in those and practicing some liturgies associated with it. So we'll actually be practicing Pure Land principles. You go there because the center of gravity is so high. It's as if you were in a neighborhood. Imagine this scenario. You're in a neighborhood or a city where everybody is a teacher or a lama or a rinpoche or some elevated being, right? So the center of gravity is so high, you have no choice but to kind of step up into that frequency, so to speak, and be elevated by it. So we go there, and I'll pause for a second, but there are other reasons why one goes there, but this is a big one because it actually is a kind of a catalyzing situation where you can set the intentionality, you set the vectors for getting there, and then once you're there, whoa, it's conveyor belt, fast track to awakening.
That's great. So you said a little bit about why should we be interested in going there, and also I think I heard you start to touch on how do we get there. So is there anything that you want to say about more about either of those?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the other reasons you want to get there, this is something that I originally thought about when I started studying this 20 years ago. For students of Buddhism, a very common question is, well, like, geez, well, like, what about my Bodhisattva vow, right? Because when you're going there, the Pure Lands, at least this one that we're going to be focusing on, it's not the same as full-blown enlightenment awakening. Um, but it's a really terrific halfway house. Some levels it sounds a little bit like purgatory, right? But it's not. And so it's just an extraordinarily conducive environment where, like I mentioned, once you're there, non-retrogressive, you're never going to fall back. So they are outside. It's not nirvana, but it is outside of the scope of samsara, the realm of conditioned, confused existence, and it's non-retrogressive in the sense that once you're there, you can't fall back. And so you're born into one of these 10, they're called lotus grades, which are 10 kind of degrees, depending on certain factors. And then from there, what happens is the reason you go there is not only is everybody, it's like a Harvard, it's just this amazing institution of higher learning, so to speak, where they even say it in liturgies that we'll be practicing. It's quite evocative descriptions of what is it like to be there. And they talk about, the birds sing the Dharma and the rivers speak the Dharma. And so it creates, and we'll talk about this shortly, it creates this really wonderful kind of sacred world environment. But other reasons for going there is contrary to this notion that, well, geez, like what about saving all sentient beings and my bodhisattva vow? Well, every single teacher I've talked to, and I've talked to many about this, and the texts support this, you can actualize your bodhisattva vow much more rapidly by going there. Because psychospiritual development is so quick, so powerful, you develop these classic, they're called siddhis, kind of paranormal psychic powers, clairaudience, clairvoyance, the ability to engage in these really kind of hyper capacities to help others left, so to speak, left behind. And then because your development is so rapid that you actually can accelerate your stages through the bodhisattva levels in the past to reach full-blown awakening. And then, of course, from there, my gosh, then you can pretty much do anything, right? And so we'll be talking a lot about the really cool thing about this program, I think, is the juxtaposition of the esoteric with the exoteric joining heaven and earth. Because while we will be working and honoring, paying homage to the way this tradition is spoken about in practice with over 100 million practitioners, like what do they really do? What constitutes the practice? What's that all about? We'll be engaging in that. What I think is super interesting for me is the difference between sutra and tantric Pure Lands. So the classic Pure Land approach is the more sutra approach. I'm not dismissing it at all. It's beautiful, it's valid, it is 100% fantastic thing to do. But I'm more interested, and a lot of people in the West are more interested in the kind of tantric Pure Lands. In other words, Pure Land principle. And this is where it gets really cool. Because what we're really going to focus on, so we'll probably spend 2-3 days on the sutra approach to really understand it. We'll be doing the classic liturgies about practicing it, reciting Pure Land mantras, that kind of thing. But then the real juice comes in discovering that you're already in a Pure Land, right? And so this is where it really comes into the kind of the tantric end of things. That basically, if you just remove the cataracts of confusion, open the aperture of your awareness, whatever metaphor you want to use, you're already in the sacred ground. It's what Thich Nhat Hanh talked about as the Pure Land of the present moment. And this is where things really become cool, because then you realize, oh my gosh, I just have to really wake up to realize I already am in this dimension. And so one of my favorite maxims here, and this is a powerful one, is that the spiritual path is more perceptual than actual. That's a really good one. That fundamentally, on one level, you're not, on a more absolute level, you're not really going anywhere. You're basically opening up, realizing that, like they say in their traditions, you're already a Buddha, you just forgot. You're already a bodhisattva deity, whatever you want to call that symbolism of the ultimate, you just forgot. And so these teachings jog our memory. They help us to recall, say, hey, wait a second. I am already a bodhisattva. I'm already a Buddha. I'm already living in a Pure Land. Excuse me. And so Therefore, this is a highly empowering journey. So again, and not in any dismissive way, it's not, in an ultimate sense, it's not about coming up and out and going to some location, even though that has provisional tremendous validity. For people in the West, most seem to be interested, okay, well, how does this apply to my life right now? How can I apply Pure Land principles now? And so we'll be spending probably more than half the time exploring that one and actually talking about what does purity really represent? What is the symbolism behind purity? And so this is where it gets really deep, because then we introduce the central core teaching, really arguably, and almost all of Buddhism is the teachings on emptiness. And so purity actually is deeply connected with this notion of emptiness, which is so central to the Buddhist tradition. And so as the program goes along, we do a little hand holding, we work into these deeper waters, and we start to get into some really juicy things. And then always kind of spinning it back, tying it back in to sutra principles, but emphasizing more the empowerment aspects, the immediacy of the Pure Land principle. That it's like, hey, wait a second, wow, if I just open my eyes and open my heart, oh my gosh, I'm already in a Pure Land. How do we do that? That's where it gets really cool.
I love that, the empowerment to remember that we're already there and
Yeah,
what's blocking that. Yeah.
exactly.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that kind of leads into another question, like, how do we get there?
Yeah, okay. So again, if we're talking about a kind of sutra approaches, which is where we're going to start, we do this by the classic tradition. The Japanese schools are the ones that really emphasize this more than others. The Pure Land traditions there really emphasize what's called the recitation of the Nembutsu, which is basically reciting the mantra associated with the Buddha of that realm, which is Amitabha. And so the idea there is mindscape leads to landscape, so to speak. It's a little bit like a dream incubation kind of thing, that the last thought you have on your mind in a particular moment of transition, just like what happens before you go to sleep, is powerfully affecting of what happens in that next moment. And so the classic mantra recitation in that sutra world is critical. In the Tantra arena, which also will help you get into Sukhavati, but more importantly, helps you realize that this is Sukhavati, then you work with the collection of merit. We talk about merit principles. What does merit really look like? Creating the proper intentionality, and then creating the almost like the visualization aspects of it. So in the three major sutras that are connected to the Pure Land tradition, there's a longer Pure Land Sutra, the shorter Pure Land Sutra, and then there's what's called a meditation or visualization sutra. And so this is tantric practitioners will really relate to this, because here what you do is you basically grease the skids by becoming really, really intimate with the alleged topography of what the Pure Land really is. And this is where it's really evocative. So the practice we'll be doing that comes from Karma Chagme Rinpoche, a supreme Tibetan master. Now, I need to throw this into the mix as well. Even though there isn't an overt Pure Land sect in like Tibetan Buddhism, there's a very strong underlying Pure Land orientation. And so part of what I will be doing in this program is talking about all the incredible masters in the schools of Tibetan Buddhism, where this is not really taught that frequently. How many of these amazing masters like Machik Labdrong and Tsongkhapa and Karma Chagme, I mean, amazing cascade of people you're going to recognize these names and they're going, I had no idea that these individuals taught about Pure Land. So one of the other ways, and this is connected to people who do visualization practices and whatnot, is actually reading and practicing evocative liturgies that invoke this. And so we'll be doing that within a classic kind of sutra setting. And then we're going to be reciting a really brilliant, fantastic kind of tantric Pure Land practice that is much more subtle, nuanced, esoteric, and just majestic. So the first 3 days we'll be doing a classic liturgy from Karma Chagme Rinpoche, the remainder of the program, I'll be introducing this unbelievably evocative thing. It's also full of amazing images, and then also full of devotion, because this is another way you grease the skids. You create this extraordinary devotional capacity. And well, how does that work in terms of like the Tantra approach to it? Well, one way to open the aperture of your awareness to realize that you're in a Pure Land is, in fact, opening and using the powers of devotion. I mean, when you're really in love, when you're really devoted, your mind and your heart are really open. And so the practice of devotion is really very instrumental in terms of doing two things. One is it opens you up to the blessings of Amitabha and the lineage master. So this is kind of the supernatural end of it all, opening yourself up to the ability to tap into our peeps, right? These amazing wisdom sources that we can have access to, we can have tap into. But just as compellingly is working with archetypal principles, like I mentioned or alluded to earlier, the Pure Land principle. And so this is when you realize the Pure Lands, as I was suggesting earlier, they're also within your own heart. And so by working with these practices, it's like we're going to be doing a twofer thing. So we're going to be working to cultivate the seeming externality, the seeming descent, not seeming, it's alleged, it's true. And then just as compelling, if not more so, the kind of non-theistic end, that we have these principles within us. We have Amitabha within us. We have these Pure Land characters, so to speak. They're already part of our makeup. And so by working with both the inner and the outer, we open ourselves to the blessings from these external agencies, which are, again, just as real or unreal as we are. And then we also invoke from within. We ignite, we spark through these processes of opening to allow these energetics within us to radiate and shine. And so sometimes I like to think of it as like we then become sandwiched by these wonderful, powerful, sacred forces, both within and without. And, then what happens is, you start to walk around and you start to look at the world just a little bit differently. Again, path is perceptual more than actual. And you start to realize that, whoa, if I just do this kind of spiritual ophthalmology, right? Corrective lenses, I can again start to see and feel, oh, my energies are sacred. They represent Pure Land principles. My thoughts are even sacred. I mean, things that arise within the totality of my being that I would normally think of as being impure. Well, they're not inherently impure. No, we stain them with our inappropriate relationships to them. So this, again, is where it goes into the deeper so-called tantric end, where we start to work with purity and impurity principles and translate them in a way that has a lot of power and applicability to the way we live our lives. And when I started studying this stuff decades ago, this was the really big surprise for me. It was like, whoa, now I see how this thing completely fits into tantric Buddhist approaches and the seemingly more esoteric approaches.
Beautiful. I've still got goosebumps from when you use the word majestic, and that's kind of, what's it like being in the Pure Land, and you've already said a little bit about that, but is there anything more that?
Yeah, I think there is more. Because I think when you really understand, again, Pure Land principles in a non-dualistic way, then you can really work with this in this incredibly impure environment that we find ourselves in today. The divisiveness, I mean, just look at what's happening in the world. I mean, this is like far from a Pure Land. But if you really understand Pure Land principles, you can enter the most impure environments. And let me just share one story with His Holiness Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche. A dear friend of mine was in his presence when he said this. They were in India, which can get a little bit intense, right? They were in an environment super hot, I mean, everything in India is super, right? Like it flies and everything. It was just like almost like a hell realm, right? And people were like complaining about the heat and the flies and the whole India thing. And Khyentse Rinpoche, because the vision of his purity was already so kind of intact, said something to the effect of like, he goes, I see just purity. And this isn't some kind of whitewashing. This isn't some like covering over. No, what it is it's cutting through the projected levels of impurity. So this is where it becomes really practical in terms of things like social activism, engaging in the world. Because I say this all the time these days, Janet, that if what we're doing with this so-called spiritual business is not of benefit to the world, it's irrelevant. And so here, this is super important because, Pure Lands can seem like an escapist thing, a spiritual bypass thing. I'm just going to FedEx to this heaven-like environment and get away from this crap show. No, not at all. Because once you have this skill set with you, now you can enter, you can see. It's not like you're dismissing all the difficulties. No, but you're able to see them much more clearly for what they are, and you're able to see the goodness and the purity of the beings that implement these impure strategies. And so therefore, from this higher view, it has this kind of like trickle down economics, right? Trickle down spirituality. It comes into play and it informs and transforms the way you relate to the people you live with, the way you relate to your world, and you start, you're able to use this kind of X-ray vision. That's the other way to look at it. You study these Pure Land principles to develop this X-ray vision that allows you to see through all the projections of impurity, all the things that are there from a relative perspective, but you can see through them. And then through that kind of capacity, which is both diagnostic and prescriptive, you can then use that kind of superior, literally insight, right, to really be of benefit. So this is super important with something like Pure Land teachings, which otherwise can seem like just, get me out of here kind of thing. No, not at all. In fact, what they do is they do the opposite. They allow you to go in so deeply, so purely, so cleanly, again, that you start to see, whoa, 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 we just need to look at what's happening here in the right way. And then we can start to be of some benefit. So we kind of come, I wouldn't say full circle, but we come all the way back to realizing, wow, now I understand how I can use these principles right here, right now, to be a benefit not only to myself, but also to others. So they apply. I mean, this is so cool. So the Pure Land teachings classically came about principally as a way to prepare for death. I mean, that's like their big thing. So you have that going for you. That I'm not dismissing that. That is definitely part of the trajectory here. But for me, the most important thing is how do we take them, these teachings, and apply them just as much to life. So they'll be applied towards the death journey. That's the classic kind of instantiation. But part of my charter is to really bring these teachings to life, to empower them, to realize their extraordinary applicability, and to have people who may not be familiar with this teaching walk away going, oh my goodness, I had no idea these Pure Land teachings and principles were so applicable, so profound. And so that's what I'm excited to share, because this was not apparent to me when I first started poking around with this decades ago. But ever since then, especially since I teach so much around death and dying, wow, has it really helped me with that, the whole Bardo thing, the Bardo journey. But just as much, if not more so, the ability to translate these and apply these teachings and practices to every moment in this so-called impure world. There
Um,
you have it.
I love that. That's such a beautiful invitation and such a beautiful gift to, just by changing the way we look, we change what we see, and by doing that, we change how we're able to respond to it.
Yeah, boy. I mean, right here, spot on, Janet. Right here, it's like the first of the Eightfold Noble Path, which is what? Right view. So that's the other thing, like inherent within this teaching is like right view. What does that really mean in this regard? What is wrong view in contradistinction to that? And so that definitely comes back into play at yet another level with these teachings.
Such a gift to ourselves and the world, and more needed than ever right now.
I think so. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. So I'm super excited. This is a set of teachings I have a lot of passion for. And the more I understand them, the more I translate them into my daily life, this kind of cultural translation thing, in conjunction with the practice and honoring of the traditional expositions, the more I realize, boy, there's a reason why the Buddha and so many Tibetan masters and others have espoused and propagated these teachings for a really long time. They definitely have a place in this world.
Well, thank you for bringing them to us in the form of this program, the Blissful Pure Lands, being offered as a hybrid program, so both an on-land option and an online option this May 20th to 26th.
Yeah,
Any,
cool.
any final words, Andrew?
No, I don't think so. I think we gave a pretty good introduction to the spirit behind these practices, and jump on in and let's discover the purity within and without and see how it affects your world like on the spot. Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye-bye.